Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to get microscopic. We're diving deep inside our own bodies to look at this really fascinating genetic condition, one that messes with the very shape of our red blood cells. And trust me, the consequences are huge. We're talking about hereditary spherocytosis.
Okay, think about it like this. Your body has millions of these tiny little delivery trucks, your red blood cells, zipping around, dropping off oxygen everywhere. But what if those trucks were, well, the wrong shape? What if they were built like rigid, round beach balls instead of flexible delivery vans? They couldn't squeeze down the narrow side streets, right? They just get stuck and sent straight to the junkyard. And that, right there, is the heart of the problem we're digging into today. So here's our game plan. We'll start with what HS actually is. Then we'll take a close look at the cell causing all the trouble. After that, we'll cover the signs and symptoms, and finally, how it's diagnosed and treated. Pretty straightforward.
All right, let's get right into it. The whole story of this condition, when you boil it all down, is about a shapeshift. It's about something that's supposed to be a flexible little disc turning into a rigid, unforgiving sphere.
So what are we actually talking about here? Well, hereditary spherocytosis, or HS for short, is a genetic blood disorder. The hereditary part means it runs in families, passed down through genes. And what it does is it forces red blood cells into that sphere shape we mentioned. The big problem? This new shape makes them super fragile, so they break apart way, way too easily.
And this is really the key thing to grasp. A healthy red blood cell, it's what's called a biconcave disc. But a better way to think of it is like a squishy donor, right? It can bend and fold and squeeze through the tiniest little blood vessels. But a spherocyte? No way. It's more like an overinflated basketball. It's totally rigid, it's round, and it has absolutely zero of that flexibility it needs to do its job.
But why? Why does this even happen in the first place? To get that, we've got to look even closer, right down at the cell's blueprint. Turns out it's all because of a tiny flaw in its internal framework.
The root cause is genetic. We're talking about tiny little typos or mutations in the genes that are the instruction manual for building the red blood cell's internal skeleton. You can picture it like a flexible scaffolding of proteins, a mesh that's supposed to give the cell that perfect, squishy donut shape. But when some of those proteins, like Ankyrin or Spectrin, are built wrong, the whole structure just can't hold up. It becomes unstable and kind of collapses in on itself.
So this is the journey, the short and pretty brutal life, of one of these misfit cells. It all starts in the bone marrow, where it's born with that flawed structure. As soon as it hits the bloodstream, it takes on that spherical shape. It then tries its best to navigate the body's highway system, but it really struggles to squeeze through the tight spots. And then it arrives at its final destination, the spleen. And because it's so rigid, it gets trapped. And that's the end of the line. It's destroyed. Yeah, that spleen, it's like the body's ultimate bouncer. Super strict. Its whole job is to check every single red blood cell and pull the old, worn out, or damaged ones from the crowd. And it has this one test, what we can call the squeeze test. It forces the cells through these impossibly narrow passages. Your healthy, flexible donut cells, they just squish right on through, no problem. But those rigid, ball-shaped spherocytes, they can't pass. They get stuck, and the spleen just disposes of them. Okay, so that's what's happening on this tiny, microscopic scale. But what does all of that, this constant, relentless destruction of red blood cells, what does that actually mean for a person? How does it feel? Let's zoom out and look at the body's reaction. Usually, this condition shows up with what doctors call the classic triad of symptoms. 3 main things, and each one is a direct result of those cells breaking down. First up, you've got anemia. This makes you feel tired, wiped out, maybe look a bit pale, and it's happening simply because you're losing red blood cells faster than your body can replace them. Next is jaundice. That's when your skin and eyes can get a yellowish tint. It's caused by a buildup of a waste product called bilirubin, which comes from all those destroyed cells. And number 3, an enlarged spleen, or splenomegaly. And that's no surprise, right? The spleen is working 24/7, trying to clean up this constant mess, so it literally gets bigger from all the extra work. But here's a really important point. HS isn't the same for everyone. It's a spectrum. For about 25% of people, it's so mild, they might go their whole lives without even knowing they have it. The biggest group, around 65%, falls into the moderate category. They'll definitely have symptoms. And then you have a smaller group, about 10%, who deal with a much more severe form of the condition. So, if a doctor sees these kinds of symptoms, how do they figure out if it's actually HS? How do they connect the dots and get to a diagnosis? Let's get into the detective work.
It really is like a puzzle. The first piece is looking at a blood sample under a microscope. You can literally see the little round spherocytes that shouldn't be there. Then there's a cool test called the osmotic fragility test. Basically, they put the red blood cells in salt water. Healthy cells are tough, but the fragile spherocytes, they just pop. It's a dead people way. And of course, since the H stands for hereditary, asking about family history is a massive clue. All this plus a standard complete blood count helps paint the full picture. Okay, so the diagnosis is in. What happens now? That brings us to our last big topic, management and treatment. How do you live with HS?
Generally, the approach to treatment splits into two main camps. On one side, you have supportive care. This means things like taking folic acid supplements to help your body crank out more red blood cells, keeping a close eye on blood counts, and for more severe cases, getting blood transfusions. Then there's the other camp, the more definitive treatment, a splenectomy. That's the surgical removal of the spleen. You're basically taking the bouncer out of the equation to stop the cells from being destroyed.
But taking out your spleen, that is a huge decision. It's not something you do lightly. Yes, it can make a massive difference, sometimes almost getting rid of the symptoms entirely. But there's a serious trade-off. The spleen is a major player in your immune system. Without it, your body is much more vulnerable to some really dangerous, even life-threatening infections. And that's a risk you carry for the rest of your life.
So, as we bring this all together, what's the big idea here? For me, it's just mind-blowing that a single microscopic glitch in a cell's architecture, a tiny mistake in one little protein, can create this massive ripple effect that impacts a person's entire life and health. It's an incredible reminder of just how fragile and interconnected everything inside of us truly is.
And that kind of leaves us with this final thought, doesn't it? How can a condition born from such a tiny, tiny flaw reveal so much about the human body? It shows us this incredible paradox, that our bodies are both unbelievably fragile, but at the same time, amazingly resilient and able to adapt. Something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me.